Hey everybody, it's Endymion, and I don't know if you know, but Ubisoft is kind of going through a hard time right now. From delaying Assassin's Creed Shadows to Star Wars Outlaws underperforming, and their CEO actually saying that the company has never chased agendas. Which is funny, so thanks for that, I needed a good laugh. Beyond this, I'll talk about how Ubisoft gave birth to Sweet Baby Inc., and how this is all coming to a roaring meltdown unlike any other. The simple question is simply this: is Ubisoft falling apart the biggest loss for woke identity, politically driven content in gaming? And the answer to that, dear viewer, is a resounding yes. This is like the kingdom of a warring country falling apart amidst a pivotal war. And their king is shaking in his boots, his servants are robbing him blind, and his own soldiers are refusing to defend him. My dear viewers, this is the complete and utter collapse of Ubisoft as an entertainment brand, and they did it all to themselves. Let's first look at Paul Tassi, who you may know is a journalist that tends to pander to whatever these corporations want. He had an article recently titled, "After Assassin's Creed Shadows Delay, Ubisoft Acknowledges Outlaws Issues, Anti-Woke Pushback." Paul Tassi spends the majority of the article stating that Ubisoft is basically screwed, and that he is genuinely surprised that the Ubisoft higher-ups are starting to cave into what he calls anti-woke pushback, or as I like to call it for what it really is, common sense. What's crazy is that at one point, Paul Tassi says in his article that he has seen talk about the 3-month delay and that it is being used to actually remove Yasuke or lessen his presence in the game entirely. But at this point, I don't know if it's going to do much of anything. Can you really remove the guy? I mean, he's on the front cover, he's in all of the promos, he's in the CGI trailers, gameplay debuts. His identity right now is deliberately tied to this game in every way. Would I think it would be better without Yasuke? Absolutely. But do I think they'll do it regardless? I don't know. However, it would be amazingly funny to see this game get re-announced with no Yasuke anymore. I would actually laugh so hard I would probably die. There would be no greater comedic moment than for this to happen, because the journalists would then go rabid and then sales of Shadows would shoot through the roof in response. If Ubisoft is smart, they'll remove Yasuke and then they'll turn him into a Japanese guy and then fix everything surrounding it. But will they? I mean, I guess we'll see, but could they be crazy enough to do it, man? Imagine that. Let's just assume for a moment here that they do end up doing this, okay? If Yasuke were to be removed from Shadows completely, could 3 months be a reasonable amount of time to actually complete this massive undertaking? Like I said, the guy is on the cover, he's in the trailers, but to be real with you, it wouldn't be impossible to do. Don't get me wrong, it would be an insane amount of work, I'm not debating that. They would have to effectively change every single conversation where the name Yasuke is ever uttered, and of course change it to some original character's name instead. But beyond this, I would wager that the game likely has full-blown expensive cutscenes where Yasuke is shown fighting for his lord. They could of course just go in and change him to a Japanese man, but what would this end up doing in the long run? On one hand, if this were to happen as I play devil's advocate here, it would understandably come across as a very positive thing for many who are against Shadows right now. I believe the majority of people generally don't want Shadows not because of Naoe existing, but because of Yasuke. Because of course he's the first actual historical figure that we're playing as in an Assassin's Creed game for seemingly the entirety of it. The only other time I can think of is King Leonidas in the beginning of Odyssey, which was more of a tutorial until you actually chose your character in that game. And I think that we can all agree that Yasuke being in the game is a big reason why that the Japanese are against the game, because it's a random foreigner that's attacking their own people in their homeland while wearing their cultural armor and using their weapons and techniques to do so. As one user on Twitter put it, and oh boy, this is spicy, they said about the delay of Shadows, just delay it forever. No one wants to play as a black dude killing Asians in feudal Japan. We see that enough in San Francisco. That is one spicy comment on this, but hey, that's freedom of speech working as intended, fellas. I would wager if anything gets fixed about Shadows, it will hopefully be things like the one-legged Torigate that was being used in a merchandise item that takes place hundreds of years before said nuclear bomb caused that Torigate to happen, as well as the myriad of mistakes like having portraits on walls in-game that didn't even exist until after the time period the game is set in. and of course, much more. I figure this will be what they will likely be fixing, but I do think if they did fix Yasuke, we would actually have a mega hit on our hands, and no, I'm not kidding either. Removing Yasuke and then taking the time to properly adhere to and respect the authenticity of Japanese culture would actually go a long way in restoring faith in the franchise. I think releasing it the way it is now, well, it will do nothing but tank Assassin's Creed and just kill Ubisoft. And as you continue to watch the video after this segment, you'll see what I mean by Ubisoft just dying like crazy. But if what Paul Tassi is saying is true, and again, I don't know if it is, so take it as a rumor, but if it is, Shadows might actually be worth buying. Sure, it's annoying, we would have two playable characters again like in Syndicate, but if they're both Japanese, and the new Yasuke is just a giant Japanese dude, I'm actually okay with this. Just let the people of that nation have their own game. I don't want a white guy playable in a future Assassin's Creed game that is set in China and the vice versa. If Ubisoft does this, they will win big, but will they? I guess time will tell. Now let's move on to another story where, as Park Place details, financial analyst describes Ubisoft's sales collapse and delaying of Assassin's Creed Shadows as total meltdown as stock price collapses. The analyst in question is actually Valiant Renegade, who's a friend of the channel and also recently released a video about Ubisoft stock prices hitting a new record low. He also interviewed me for the video as well, so I appear at certain points with a disheveled head of hair as I was just about to go to the gym when Valiant asked me for my opinion on things. But my messy hair aside, Valiant brings up some crazy points, so here, please watch this clip.
A little over 4 years ago, Ubisoft was trading at nearly 90 euros. 90 euros. And 4 years and 7 months later, here we are, 9 euros. That means that the company has shed 90% of its total market capitalization. And right now, as this continues on, this is going to make Ubisoft worth probably less than $1 billion on the open market by the end of trading today. Things like that lead to this. Ubisoft activist investor says it now has support of 10% of shareholders in the management tussle. An activist investor pushing for the sale of Assassin's Creed maker Ubisoft has gathered support from 10% of the French video game publisher's shareholders. AJ Investments, which itself has less than a 1% stake in Ubisoft, said it was in talks with private equity firms for its push. We call on management of Ubisoft to allow the sale of the company to third parties or private equity firms at a fair price. AJ Investments did not name the investors in its letter and declined a Reuters request for the names of said investors. The move comes weeks after AJ Investments called for a CEO change at Ubisoft, and it urged it to go private or to be sold. Ubisoft, of course, has made no comment on this, but as I stated earlier, I think that 10% is going to continue to expand, and it's going to happen probably pretty quickly after today. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Yves Guillemot may not be the CEO there anymore before Assassin's Creed actually manages to release in February, if, of course, it still manages to release in February.
And as you heard, Ubisoft's lost around 90% of their value, and about 20% of that happened in the last 24 hours as of the making of this video. Not only that, they are trying to use Assassin's Creed Shadows as a tourniquet to essentially block the bleeding from being too bad for them in the next financial quarter. Ubisoft has delayed Shadows to February, which is funny if you think about it. Because the game stars Yasuke, a so-called black samurai that totally existed, just trust me bro. And the game is coming out now during Black History Month, which is clever Ubisoft, I see what you're doing there. Gonna try to prop up Yasuke during a heightened sense of social status of virtue signaling in order to guilt trip people into supporting the game because it has a black guy in it. Obviously, most people won't fall for this, but they're hoping they can gaslight enough of you into maybe buying it. I suggest not doing that. As Grums has put it many times, it'll take around 2 years of closing your wallets until the entire game industry will have to kneel to your demands. You're already almost at the end of year 1, and I wager that most of your backlogs are probably still insane like mine is. So you don't really need most new games these days anyways. Man, I still haven't even played Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth yet. I'm still too busy trying to platinum Visions of Mana. And I want to play Space Marine 2 more as well, and my friends keep inviting me to shoot people in Fortnite between all of this, so yeah, I'm good. I don't need Shadows, especially not at release. The game is delayed for 3 months now, which is past its original release date of November 15th, but let's be real, it still won't save them. I don't know what Ubisoft thinks they can do in that time to fix this game that'll appease to players at all. The combat is already set in stone, your cinematics are done, you likely have plenty of post-DLC outfits already fixed and ready to go. So realistically, there's not much they can do. All they're hoping for at this point is to use Black History Month into goading you into buying it. I mean, Suicide Squad also took a year of extra dev time, and that didn't really save them either. It's still reviewed horribly, it's sold even worse, and now they got a new season where you can play as Deadshot's daughter Lawless. Please be excited everyone, you better clap or I'm gonna call HR and get you fired for being racist. I guess it'll be a big day come October for the 200 people that are still playing Suicide Squad, but hey, this is what happens when you don't give people what they want. Ubisoft is likely going to just close shop and liquidate their assets. I really don't see any way out for them when it comes to this. Because beyond Shadows, they have nothing that could reasonably save them in the future. Their trump cards, so to speak, were Outlaws and Shadows, and we know that Outlaws did not sell well at all. I mean, Ubisoft even admitted recently that Outlaws didn't sell within expectations and has actually reduced their profit margins by around 30%. Which is, obviously, not good at all. But hey, nobody told you to put Man Solo in the game as the lead, you did that yourselves. Actually, another YouTuber named Legendary Drops spoke to anonymous Ubisoft employees recently. In his video, he detailed that these employees told him that Ubisoft did this to themselves and that virtue signaling was a key reason why they're passing the point of no return financially. At one point in the video, an employee told him the editorial direction and overall mindset shifted from boys club to safe content. Reaching for plain characters like K-Vess in Star Wars is the perfect example of this. The idea to have beautiful characters, such as in Baldur's Gate or Uncharted, is met with distrust. So as you heard, Ubisoft went from catering to male players, or a boys club I guess, and then they went full pandering, and now they're close to liquidating everything. This safe content, as it's put, is a big reason why so much stuff sucks today. Everything is getting sanded off so that the edges are removed. There's nothing to offend you or really challenge your perspective. A lot of Western modern gaming is pretty much like that one image of SpongeBob with all of his edges gone. That's what it is, actually. Because nobody wants to play Star Wars Outlaws. The game bombed, but Ubisoft is confident that the game will sell come the fall season. But as I made the analogy in Valiant Renegade's video, Ubisoft games are like buying a car from a dealership. The moment the game is sold and it leaves the lot, so to speak, Ubisoft's games just lose a ton of their projected value right out of the gate. By this fall, Outlaws will easily be half off, if even more than that. Maybe it'll sell more by then, but it'll be at a fraction of what it could have earned during release, but hey, that's what happens. Ubisoft said, if you remember, that we should be comfortable not owning our games in the future, so I guess Ubisoft should get comfortable no longer existing and kicking rocks instead. And the fact the employees stated that they deliberately were told by management to not make K-Vess attractive like someone in Baldur's Gate 3, that tells you everything. Every assumption I made about that game was proven right. They dumbed her down on purpose, yet journalists would call you crazy if you said anything about that. They said rendering women is harder than men because reasons that don't actually mean anything, of course. They have every excuse in the book ready to go. But the simple truth is that if they wanted to make K-Vess look like her actress, they would have done just that. Instead, they deliberately went out of their way to give her a skinny 9-year-old boy's body and then threw a skeleton human face on the carcass, gave it a discount Sigourney Weaver haircut and a jacket, and went, "You go get 'em, kiddo." The Ubisoft dev continued by saying, safe content also leads to limited opportunity on the gameplay side, even for Star Wars. We had to work with Disney, which would have shut down most attempts of depicting a true criminal underworld with cruelty and drama. This doesn't surprise me, considering it is Disney, and they likely wanted to keep the game as far away as possible from a mature rating. But let's be honest, man, Disney has done nothing good for Star Wars. We knew from the first trailer that this was all being designed by committee. Nobody wanted this slop, so them not being able to even properly convey a criminal empire is not really surprising. Just look at stuff like Book of Boba Fett. The dude was supposed to replace Jabba the Hutt, but wanted to do it with honor. Like, dude, if you wanted to do something with honor, you wouldn't be a criminal boss. That's the antithesis of what being a criminal is about. They just don't get it, man. So that's not really surprising either way. But this final point here was the one that made me really facepalm, where the Ubisoft employee said, "One of the constraints for Kay was that she must never punch down. For us in space levels, it meant that civilian ships couldn't be hurt at any point by the player, for example." This is beyond stupid, but unsurprising as well. I mean, shooting civilian ships, fine, I get it. I understand. Why you wouldn't do that for obvious reasons, it's kind of how you can't exactly Fusro Da a child in Skyrim unless you apply mods, I understand. But Kay not being able to punch down is funny, because if you know what that actually means, it makes a lot more sense as to why this game failed. Punching down is a concept that you shouldn't attack those beneath you either in economic or social status. So like if Mark Zuckerberg went outside and then just roundhouse kicked a homeless guy, that's punching down, or kicking down I guess in that example. But you need to realize that concepts like this always get mutated by activists somehow. So punching down isn't just billionaires going streets of rage on civilians, but it also gets placed through a racial bias as well. So for example, at the highest top of that social caste that is impenetrable are the guys with the tiny hats, you know the ones. And then beneath them are probably anyone who identifies as trans, and then after that you got black people in general, or minorities as they're usually called. And then as you go down the class pyramid, the safest people to punch down to are of course white people. So if a white person calls out or smacks down a black person for their take on something, that's considered punching down in these people's heads. However, if a black person shuts down a white person, this is considered punching up because white people are the devil, of course, according to, well, every single organization in existence apparently. So taking this all into account, Kay Vess not being able to punch down means that she's not able to shoot people or do anything bad per se to someone beneath her in class. Now, I haven't bought or played the game, so I don't know the exact moment-to-moment story beats of Outlaws. However, I would wager there is likely not many cases where Kay either punches someone who is trans or non-binary, and I'm very likely going to say that she probably only shoots a lot of white guys or punches a lot of white guys and makes fun of them. I mean, the main villain, I believe anyways, is a white guy, which I mean makes sense and kind of proves my point. Because making your bad guy a white guy is perfect for these kinds of game devs, because whatever they do to the bad guy, it can be as heinous as they want, because whatever the bad white guy's fate is, it's never really considered punching down. Like, name me one time a trans person or a person with a tiny hat was the main villain of a video game in the last 4 years. You probably can't. However, if I were to ask you to name me a white guy villain, literally anything in the last 4 years that's been made, we could probably make a top 10 list easily. This whole idea of not being able to punch down, not showing criminal empires for what they really are, or ensuring that Kay Vess is not beautiful enough in order to buck the trends on what is perceived as beauty, are a big reason why Ubisoft is dying. I mean, even Naoe in Shadows has been called out for looking gender ambiguous as well, but at this point, are you really even surprised by this? None of these characters are allowed curves or defining features to their faces. They must be, as this Ubisoft employee puts it, as safe as can be in order to not upset certain groups, but all they end up with is slop that's for nobody, and frankly, we're all tired of it. Hence why Ubisoft is falling apart like toilet paper in a rainstorm. Outlaws is also coming to Steam soon as well. And this is likely only being done because Ubisoft is hurting for money, dude. They would probably sell the game on Tesla's dashboards if they could, as long as it garnered them more money at this point. It probably doesn't help that certain firms are urging Ubisoft employees to go on strike and demand higher pay and to allow for remote work. But again, let's remember that Ubisoft, as of the making of this video, is currently worth about $1 billion in total, which I know is a lot of money still, but when you consider they have literal thousands of employees, that money can be stretched incredibly thin very fast. Ubisoft will likely deny this because they don't have the funds to support these demands, But then if that's true, those employees will strike, and then Ubisoft is kind of left in a screwed position no matter what they do. And let's say that hypothetically that this strike does happen soon. Now, what do you do with the delay of Shadows? If your strike lasts for months, then your delay to polish up the game means nothing in the long run. Ubisoft then ends up with the game that they moved out of the lucrative fall season for a Black History Month Hail Mary that can't be worked on if none of the employees want to because they striked because you won't give them more money for all of the work that they're doing. As you can probably imagine, this is a beautiful recipe for headaches all around, and it probably doesn't help that around 10% of Ubisoft shareholders are currently actually trying to negotiate and push the other 90% of the shareholders into the idea of just selling off the company entirely. Which ultimately, I think this is what is going to happen because, like I said, there's nothing post Assassin's Creed Shadows that really matters from this company. Sure, they got Assassin's Creed Hex or Hexy at some point, but generally speaking, between then and now, this company hasn't really got a single thing going for it. The best case scenario for Ubisoft and its shareholders now is to just admit defeat and then sell the company off entirely. Liquidate the assets, sell off the IP to whoever is willing to buy it. I would wager places like Microsoft would love to own the Far Cry series or maybe Ghost Recon. Do I think Microsoft could buy those IPs and then turn them into great games? Probably not, no. Because Microsoft is more of a software company than an entertainment company. They don't really seem to know how to make any good games. If you need examples, well, just look at their portfolios for years now. Outside of maybe Forza and maybe Sea of Thieves, I guess, it's kind of just full of flops and misfires. And I mean, technically, Sony is already doing their own Assassin's Creed-esque series with the Ghost of games, so they probably wouldn't be interested in buying Assassin's Creed either. But I do think that when it comes to Ubisoft's properties, at this point, anyone besides them would probably be a better fit to make these games than Ubisoft themselves. I think Watch Dogs in the hands of, say, Rockstar could be an incredible game idea, but in Ubisoft's hands, it's a generic open world game. And that's sort of the problem across the board. All their games are made by committee drivel slop. There's no identity outside of maybe Assassin's Creed or Rabbids. Everything kind of just feels and plays the same, it's all homogenized, and nobody wants to buy these games anymore. Like if they can't make people want to buy a Star Wars game or an Assassin's Creed game, you know you're cooked. Because those should have been the easiest slam dunks possible for your company, but alas, here we are. Of course, Ubisoft's current CEO, Yves Guillemot, said via Park Place, Ubisoft CEO claims company's goal is not to push any specific agenda, despite company's website saying otherwise. Their CEO said, and I quote, "In the light of recent challenges, we acknowledge the need for greater efficiency while delighting players. As a result, beyond the first important short-term actions undertaken, the Executive Committee, under the supervision of the Board of Directors, is launching a review aimed at further improving our execution, notably in this player-centric approach, and accelerating our strategic path towards a higher-performing model to the benefit of our stakeholders and shareholders." Finally, let me address some of the polarized comments around Ubisoft lately. I want to reaffirm that we are an entertainment-first company, creating games for the broadest possible audience, and our goal is not to push any specific agenda. We remain committed to creating games for fans and players that everyone can enjoy, end quote. The CEO says one thing, but realistically, this is all a huge lie, and it's surprising that he said this so candidly considering if you go on Ubisoft's website right now, you can find a section of their site dedicated to what is called diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, celebrating diversity and putting belonging at the heart of what we do. Then there's Rashi Sika, who is Ubisoft's Vice President of Global Diversity and Inclusion, who said this via that DEI page, and I quote again. For Ubisoft, putting diversity and inclusion at the heart of everything we do means providing an environment where employees can thrive, building open-minded communities where players can connect, and creating games that reflect the diversity of the world we live in. We will not accomplish all these goals overnight. Just as it takes years of iteration to develop a AAA game, we will only become a more diverse and inclusive company by continuously improving, trying new ideas, and learning from the result. It's a long-term commitment, one that we will tackle with the same passion and dedication that we bring to our games. We want to build the most creative, inclusive, and diverse teams across all fields. We will continue to increase representation in our company by building more inclusion across our systems and ensuring equal access to opportunities for everyone. We will create gaming experiences that push representation forward by embedding diversity and inclusion across our processes, increasing representation in our teams, and offering access to resources that help teams to build more authentic, inclusive, and accessible gaming experiences. We will set the standard for inclusion for our teams, players, and partners, and will collaborate with leading organizations to expand our knowledge, grow our reach, give back to the community, and champion inclusion in our industry. End quote. Yeah, so like I said, the CEO is saying we don't push agendas at all, and then their vice president of diversity is like, actually, all we do here is push agendas. You can't really make this up. I'm reading what they're saying on the site word for word, of course, unless someone changes what the site says after this video goes live, I guess, but hey, as of now, that's what it says. Remember that Sweet Baby Inc. was founded within the hallowed halls of Ubisoft, so seeing this company burn and fall apart the way that it has is, well, quite glorious to see. They can't help themselves and things are falling apart, so definitely they will have nowhere to turn to. They're kind of like a cornered animal at this point, and the CEO can say whatever he wants. He really thought that Ubisoft would exist for the rest of time like Disney or something, but it's very likely the company either evaporates and dies in 2025, or they somehow turn this all around, which I sincerely doubt. The only way Ubisoft fixes these problems, in my opinion, is to fire all the diversity officers and vice presidents, and anyone who pushes anything like that from the company. And then issue a company-mandated requirement that no game panders anymore, and then they start catering almost exclusively to a male audience. Of course, the journalists won't like that, but that's how you win and thrive in this industry. Go look at Space Marine 2. Hell, even Black Myth Wukong recently announced that they broke 20 million copies sold, which, by the way, is more than any Assassin's Creed game has ever sold, and I wager most of those millions were not from raging feminist weirdos, but average guys who just want to play games with no agendas. Thank you for watching. Thanks to my patrons and members. Subscribe. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.